over and over again that we're living at a time of extreme political polarization. A growing number of commentators have even speculated that thanks to the extreme animosity between Democrats and Republicans these days, we might be teetering on the brink of a second civil war. And of course, in the wake of events like the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade last week, the divisions between blue and red states can seem even starker than ever. However, as fractious as these partisan divisions are, there's an even larger problem in American politics than bad blood between Democrats and Republicans, and it's that more and more people are just dropping out of the political process entirely. The first thing to keep in mind is that way fewer people than you might think are following politics at all. In fact, a few years ago, a team of researchers conducted an in-depth study and found that the overwhelming majority of Americans are not what you would call political junkies. According to their findings, only 15 to 20% of Americans follow politics closely, while up to 85% of Americans follow politics casually or not at all. On top of that, the researchers also found that self-professed political junkies had very different priorities than the segment of the population that said they didn't follow politics closely. For instance, as the authors write, quote, Democrats and Republicans who don't follow politics closely believe that low hourly wages are one of the most important problems facing the country. But for hard partisans, the issue barely registers. So, in other words, there are some serious divides between political junkies, aka people who are constantly commenting on and posting about the news, or watching political YouTube shows, or making political YouTube shows, and everyone else, broadly speaking. What's interesting is that the people who are least plugged into the ongoing political stew nevertheless still have very real concerns about things like wages that politics are theoretically designed to address. That tracks with a number of other studies that show that non-voters paradoxically tend to want more government intervention than the people who regularly turn out to vote. These studies find that non-voters are more supportive than regular voters of measures like minimum wage increases and increased government spending on healthcare, public education, and social safety net benefits. To look at just one example, this study out of California finds that compared to residents who vote regularly, California residents who don't vote say they prefer a bigger government, more spending on public services, and more government action to reduce inequality. So what exactly explains the fact that these people are non-voters? A political junkie might ask, if people who don't vote tend to want more government action to solve problems like economic inequality, why don't they get involved in politics? Well, the unfortunate reality, of course, is that average people have very little influence on politics, even when they do try to express their political preferences. Back in 2014, the political scientists Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page were in fact able to quantify just how little power most Americans have on policymaking, despite living in an ostensible democracy. They conducted a landmark study where they looked at a decade of data to measure policymakers' responsiveness to different groups, and what they found is that legislators are so disproportionately responsive to the policy preferences of economic elites and business lobbyists that the influence of the average citizen on policymaking was essentially zero. Gilens and Page write, even big majorities, 60 to 80% of Americans, get the policy changes they want only about 40% of the time. This has real consequences. Millions of Americans are denied government help with jobs, incomes, healthcare, or retirement pensions. They do not get action against climate change or stricter regulation of the financial sector or a tax system that asks the wealthy to pay a fair share. On all these issues, wealthy Americans tend to want very different things than average Americans do, and the wealthy usually win. Similarly, in 2018, another group of researchers looked at the disconnect between members of Congress and their constituents and found that congressional members of both parties and their top aides pretty consistently misjudge what their constituents even want. To cite just a few examples, representatives drastically underestimated the public's support for things like background checks on gun sales. They also underestimated how much their constituents supported raising the minimum wage and government spending on infrastructure. So when you have a political system that's wildly out of touch with what most working people want, but at the same time also extremely responsive to what rich people want, it's not really a huge shock that more and more people are dropping out of the political process. What this all means, at least to me, is that just pleading with or even berating people to wake up or to get out and vote, which is what Democratic leaders and commentators perpetually do after every political setback or Republican win, probably isn't going to do much over the long term. Likewise, I don't think that Democratic politicians constantly invoking a state of emergency by insisting that fascism is at the gates or that democracy is on the brink of collapse or that we're about to descend into a new Jim Crow era is going to generate the voter turnout they seem to hope it will. In fact, what's probably more likely is that over-the-top doomsday rhetoric from both parties will only further turn off the people that are already disengaging from politics. On the other hand, the fact that so many of the same people who say they don't follow politics or who don't regularly vote have also indicated that they are concerned about things like low wages and affordable healthcare suggests that there is a way forward. The solution to re-engaging people who have dropped out of politics, in my opinion, isn't just more awareness raising or even fighting things like voter suppression or big money in politics, as important as all of those things are. It's broad-based social programs like Medicare for All, nationwide parental leave and universal childcare, and raising the minimum wage. We all know that these types of programs will immediately help working people who have been hit hard by decades of pro-capitalist policies that have effectively transferred wealth from workers to the upper class. But I suspect these programs would also go a long way in helping to break the current feedback loop where the political system doesn't work or respond to the preferences of average people, so they increasingly disengage, which of course then means that elites have even more influence on politics because they're overrepresented at the polls. In other words, if people who want stronger safety net programs, aka current non-voters, actually see the political system responding to their concerns, they'll be more inclined to participate in politics in the future. Now, obviously, this isn't something that can just happen overnight. After all, these are the same programs that the capitalist class and the political elite consistently fight tooth and nail. But it's just another reason why those of us who are currently politically active should continue to prioritize a program of serious government intervention on inequality and a massive New Deal-style expansion of public goods, as hard as it'll be to actually win those things. To put it another way, it won't just be good for workers. In the end, it could even be good for democracy. If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.